and welcome back to the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about all the crazy stupid stuff that people do in marketing and how not to do crazy stupid stuff in marketing. Now, normally, when we have these conversations, we're looking at more kind of corporate, or maybe you want to call it the quote unquote strategic marketing. We've looked at some tactical marketing types of things, but we're taking a little different focus here today. And we're going to talk about marketing yourself, specifically in maybe a job search or as a consultant, and how we can go about harnessing some of the marketing foundations that we generally talk about on the show into something that you can use for yourself. We actually have a 3-part series that we are kicking off today. So we're kicking this off with a specific focus. Maybe I'll say, I in the title, I say for anthropologists. But really what we're talking about here is maybe more of those like human studies types of arenas where people have a lot of knowledge about people that usually they're using in their work, or they just like, it's part of their being on a day-to-day, but maybe aren't harnessing that in a marketing arena. So if you are joining us live and either you are in one of those arenas or you're not in one of those arenas and you just happen to be curious about marketing yourself, we would love to hear your voice as part of the conversation as well. There is a fancy comment section wherever you are watching. So whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, there is a comments section. And if you have questions or queries or experiences that you're like, well, this is what happened to me. Is that normal? What's up with that? Please feel free to put it in the chat and include it in the conversation today, because we would love to answer your questions, as well as I'm very excited to answer a bunch of Tim's questions. And I think Tim is excited to ask me questions, so hopefully that's true. Before we get kicked off too much, Tim and we get very curious together, so I have no worries that we're going to have many questions for each other. But Tim, before we get started, would you like to just introduce yourself to the audience, let them know who you are and why you are like, I would love to have a conversation like this?
Oh, thanks, Tracy. Yes, so I am an anthropologist. Not that I always call myself that, but I've been an anthropologist in a professional sense for, who knows exactly when that starts. Does it start when you start doing a PhD program? Does it start when you finish? Does it start when you get a job with a title anthropology? I don't really know. So I can't tell you how long I've been an anthropologist, but I've always been a people watcher, and I've always been interested in people. Doesn't mean I'm a super sociable kind of person, but I have always been really interested in people. I didn't know what anthropology was when I went to university. It was just an extra subject I picked up. And I was studying linguistics and languages and things, following an aborted attempt to study music, but that's another story. And a lifelong passion for engineering, which I have never fulfilled. So, but I ended up doing a doctorate in anthropology for who knows exactly what reason. And I was specializing in Southeastern Europe, the Balkans, and did a field project over there. And tried an academic career for a while, and that didn't really catch on. It's a tough world to break into, and ended up returning to Australia from the US, where I'd been studying, and found a job that had a job title, anthropologist, which was kind of exciting, in the Aboriginal affairs field, working on Aboriginal land claims, or native title claims is the specific category of work. So working with communities to get their land back, or get recognition of their eternal rights to land, even if they don't exactly get it back. And so I've been doing that one way or another for about 18 years now. And that work kind of sells itself. I worked inside a company for 12 of those years. And then we got downsized and I went out as a consultant. And that work kind of follows me. I keep thinking from time to time when the income's slow, I keep thinking I should start cold calling some people and saying, hey, I'm out here, I'm looking for work. And every time I start thinking about doing that, the phone rings and somebody says, hey, I've got a job for you. So I've not really had to push myself into that space. Another strand of what I do is mediation, dispute mediation. And there I have dabbled a little bit in marketing, but it's passive. I sit on a list somewhere and I get an occasional phone call from someone who comes across it in a web search. Anyway, but the anthropology that I do, or that I'm really interested in, is the way that identity works, the way that people, through their social interactions and behaviors, establish rules and norms about behavior. And in the Aboriginal affairs work I've been doing, that's the critical thing we have as anthropologists in that space have to look at the continuity of culture over time to satisfy a complex set of legal requirements, and so I have to spend a lot of time digging around in sort of ethno-history of communities and then their present-day culture, and piecing together the threads that tie them together. The kind of work that I would love to do, which I'm hoping to sort of transition towards, is work with organizations generally, not just the organizations in the space I've been working in, which do need some help in this space, but with organizations generally on collaboration, how to make collaboration work more easily, more better, how to build on what the other person in a collaboration knows and does. And that's where I kind of think, when I think about trying to market myself as an anthropologist to organizations, as someone who understands people, that's where I keep heading to. So it's, as anthropologists, we're good at reading the sort of rules and the hidden rules of culture and social practice, the tacit rules that sit underneath what we do. And that can be really useful in an organization, to have someone who can help extract what's going on below the surface, not just in the minds of individuals, but in those social spaces between them. And that's where I see the value of anthropology. And how you bring that kind of skill in and work in with other people requires a lot of something that I think is also really, really important in marketing. You've got to be a good listener. And I feel as anthropologists, we train ourselves and get trained to be good listeners and observers when we go out and do research in sort of constrained settings. We go out to some village somewhere and sit and study what people are doing. Or within organizations, you go in with a particular project focus and extract information. I find as anthropologists, we're less good at doing that kind of attentive listening and observing when we get back into the home environment. We get a little preachy. And I think there's a lot we could do to learn to collaborate better. We get trained, particularly when you get to sort of the PhD level in anthropology, you get trained to be very self-reliant. You're a sole researcher at least in social anthropology, cultural anthropology. We tend to work individually, not in teams. And the focus is on carving out your own particular niche, your own particular way of looking at things. And I think when we get back to the home environment, or try to find ways to make our anthropological training relevant, we struggle to actually believe that somebody else could have something to offer, because we're so used to being self-reliant. And we've spent, in my case, 11 years at graduate school training to think of anthropology as the only discipline that matters. So getting out into the real world and realizing that, hey, I can learn about culture from someone who's never studied culture in the way that I've studied it. It's quite a humbling experience, actually.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is really interesting because, well, I mean, first of all, there's a lot of things that came up in there. So I'm going to try and touch as many of them as possible, but we'll see if we have time for everything. But this concept of collaboration, I think, is particularly really interesting because I think oftentimes in marketing, people also get very focused on the self-reliance and like, this is who I am and this is what I know, and I need to make sure people know what I know, and that's how they trust me, and all of these different things. And we forget that our goal, and this isn't everybody's goal, but in a scenario like this where the goal is to create a solution that involves collaboration, or we're looking at culture and things of these natures, which are a very big ecosystem of people, that this isn't really just about even what most people would probably interpret as the concept of marketing yourself. Right? I just have to go out and market myself. That there's layers to be dug in that as well. Because if what I want to sell, quote unquote sell, is collaboration, the way I want to help is through collaboration, then me just coming out and being like, here I am, I'm all about collaboration, but I don't like demonstrate to people that I'm all about collaboration, then it doesn't lead me to those opportunities. And I think it's interesting too, and I'd love to hear like how this resonates with you, or if it piques additional questions from you, Tim. But when you're kind of moving or transitioning from work that you have done for like quite some time, and this is the way it's done, and I'm on a list and people call me sometimes, or I am like very well known in this network of people. And so when I'm like, hey, do you need help? People are like, yes, I do. Like, let's do a thing. It's not necessarily demonstrating that potential for collaboration either. It's just like, it's a system that serves, whether it serves greatly is a different thing, but it is a system that serves. And so in that transition, then we also get caught in, well, this is the way it works over there. So now if I want to create solutions in collaboration, I'll do the same thing. I'll get on a list. I will like make some cold calls, which sounds like you don't really want to do. We can talk about cold calls separately, but like, I guess my particular question would be like, what are the questions that come up for you in, well, how do I then use something that I'm so passionate about, like collaboration, as a marketing opportunity?
Wow, that's quite a question. But I might start by going back to something you said along the way, which was you posed a sort of rhetorical question: how do I create solutions, in a collaboration space? And I think that's maybe where the problem lies. If we go in thinking we're the one to create the solution, and I think this goes back to why the two of us met in the first place. I think because it was through some people who think very deeply and very sort of critically about what collaboration means. So we met through connections in a process program. I don't even know what you call it, called Strategic Doing, which is all about simple collaborative conversations for getting things done without waiting around for grants and funders and that sort of thing. It's sort of bootstrapping yourself as a community with a project, with a plan, with a challenge to resolve. And they define collaboration as being a process of adding value from each person's perspective to create something that none of you could have imagined on your own. And I think that's a really different approach to collaboration than most of us carry around in our minds as sort of the general meaning of the term. And so it's this idea of what do you call it? Recombinant innovation. You take things that from your field and you put them together with things from somebody else's field of expertise, and you can find ways to solve problems that neither of you on your own could solve, because you don't know how to look at the problem their way, they don't know how to look at the problem your way. You have these set of tools, they have that set of tools. And so I think if I've been thinking a lot about this lately in terms of how to foster this kind of collaborative thinking among anthropologists. I'm currently the president of the Australian Anthropological Society, and so on my mind quite a lot at the moment is the challenges facing people finishing degrees in anthropology these days, or people who would love to study anthropology but their university no longer offers it, or there's lots of transitions happening in our world, and there are not a lot of academic jobs available in anthropology anymore. So people are increasingly needing to look beyond and think about, well, what's the relevance of what I've studied? And I keep coming back to this idea of collaboration. We've got to become good collaborators, because we can, not necessarily calling ourselves anthropologists in the moment, but we can bring our observational skills and so forth into a whole range of contexts. But we're not going to get very far if we think that's the only thing that matters and that's the only way, and think we've got the solution and other people won't have anything to offer. And I think, and maybe it's just me, maybe that's the way I used to think, but I get that sense that a lot of us, we're so excited about what we've learned in our particular way of seeing the world, that we forget to listen. And so collaborating means, taking what I know and taking what you know and putting them together and in a blender and turning on the blender and something else comes out.
That like weird brown goop that comes out of the blender. I think this is really interesting though, because I actually see I'm seeing the two perspectives here as you present this, because I mean, you and I met through our mutual desire to collaborate, and so both of us we're the people who want to put stuff into the blender and mash it up and be like, oh my gosh, this tastes delicious. Equally, there are people in the world and companies in the world who are to some degree purist, right? And they're like, this is the way I look at it. This is the way I want to look at it. I want people to come and work for me because they see it this way. And we don't want a whole bunch of people thinking differently and creating a bunch of brown mush. We want this. And so there's actually opportunities for both. And it's in our own personal preference, really, where there is that opportunity, coming back to like how you're marketing yourself. It's not that one is right or one is wrong. It is about having the self-awareness that this is what is important to me, and this is how I would like to go to market. This is how I would like to present this. This is the types of people I would like to work with, yada, yada, that informs how you can go about then sharing that message with the world. So again, if you're one of those anthropologists or someone else in another arena that's just like, hey, this is my area of expertise, this is what I know, I want to use what I know, I don't want to mash up what I know, I want you to want this. I am a pumpkin. I don't know why I chose pumpkin, just coming up for me. I'm a pumpkin and you want a pumpkin, so like come and you can have a pumpkin. And we're over here being like, I might be a pumpkin, but I'm more interested in like a pumpkin pie or a pumpkin smoothie, something like where pumpkin is mixed in, but it's not like the only ingredient. And so when it comes to looking at how you might market yourself, from the simplest point of saying like, marketing is sharing, right? So I could share with you in a conversation what I'm passionate about. How do we ensure that that type of golden thread is coming through in what we're sharing? How do we make sure that comes through in conversation? How do we make sure that comes through if social media posting is in your list of things that you do, if it's volunteering for organizations and those types of things? How is that deep-rooted way of being coming out and becoming visible to the people? And there's not like one right way, there's not one wrong way. If there's 8 billion people on the planet, then there are 8 billion ways for that to become possible. And therein lies the complexity, I think, because it's not as simple as saying like, here, just do this and you will be able to successfully market yourself as an anthropologist or as an organizational psychologist or as a software developer or as a marketer. It is fed by that deeper well of who we are and what we believe. And very commonly that actually gets lost in the marketing because people are thinking about other stuff that distracts them from just letting that beingness be communicated.
Well, yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. I mean, it relates to something I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is that I think, coming from anthropology, I think we misrecognize where our value lies. And so we think about the methods and tools we've learned explicitly. So, in my branch of socio-cultural anthropology, our main mode of research is ethnographic field work, which we call participant observation, because we get into the flow of things and try and observe from inside the flow of social activity. So it's understanding people in the context in which they do what they do. And that kind of research is applicable in a lot of spaces. I mean, it's used in marketing research. It's used in user experience research, or can be, should be. I think it's getting squeezed out often, but it's there as a tool. And so we focus on the method. And what I've been thinking about probably the last 2 years or so is that that's actually not the most translatable. And it's a tool, it's a skill, it's useful in a lot of contexts. But in a lot of the work I've been doing, while I still do that kind of work, it's really shortened and curtailed by the constraints in the industry I work in. And we have limited time. You don't have 6 months to go and worm your way into a community and see what's going on. The skill that's been most useful to me, and I think is really at the heart of what makes us useful in collaboration, is a skill that we're not actually ever taught. Well, certainly I wasn't taught at graduate school. We were expected to sort of figure this out on our own in the field. It's the best I could, but it's our ability to negotiate a role within the space we're working, to negotiate a role where we can be naively curious about things and ask blunt and difficult questions that dig into the way people do things and why people do things. And I think from the other side, like the anthropologist, certainly I go in thinking I'm being naively curious here. I think from the other side, it looks the other way around. It looks curiously naive.
Which, I mean, we could associate a wrongness with that, but really there's a lot of value that can be achieved.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a little bit like what people talk about. I've heard the term beginner's mind get thrown around a lot lately, and I just got to turn off a window that keeps popping up on my computer, which is really bothersome because it's blocking your face. There we go. People talk about beginner's mind, that like there's a moment when you join an organization or when you start in a field where you get to ask those kind of questions because you're new and it's all new and you don't understand anything. And so I've come across people talking about how valuable that is, why it's a good reason to hire new people from time to time, because they come in and expose things that the rest of you don't see anymore. So it's a little bit like that, but I think it's something that we can find ways to achieve even when we're not new. And that's, even though, in the traditional anthropological research sense, we create that by being new. We go to some place we've never been. But I think as anthropologists, we've thought it was the distance, the cultural distance and all that created that possibility. But I think it's actually our ability to negotiate that social role for ourselves that really lies at the heart of it. But we don't realize we're doing it. But I think that's one of those really valuable skills. And we can be very useful in collaborations if we figure out how to construct that role for ourselves and for others, so that we share that load of asking the obtuse, naive, curious questions all the time. Not all the time, but from time to time, to keep ourselves honest and focused and real, and expose not only the problems and challenges we're trying to solve, not only exposing the sort of I hesitate to say root causes, but to expose what's going on underneath things in the challenge we're focusing on, but also to keep a fresh sense of what's going on in our collaboration itself. And so I think there are tools. I guess to get back to your observation, I think we focus too much on the tools, the doing side of it, and not enough on the being side of what we do.
And it's very interesting, because I would actually say in general, marketing, because we're so familiar with product marketing, we get very caught up in here's a cup and I have a thing. And then as a quote unquote solution provider, we think we have to have a thing. We have to have a course, we have to have a methodology, we have this protocol, this formula, there's lots of different variants of it. So we get programmed into thinking that's what we need and that's what people buy. At the same time, if you are naively curious, right? I love that, by the way. It makes me think of a kid being curious, and this is why they learn so fast. If that is one, your natural way of being, but two, the area in which you generally create the most value. So if we go back to collaboration, we're talking about recombinant innovation, right? That happens because I ask questions, I participate, I share my knowledge, you share your knowledge, all of these things are going together. And that is our preferred way. If we could do that with all of our clients, we would be so excited to go to work every day. And yet, then we have this marketing that we do. And again, whether that is a cover letter that I'm writing because I'm going kind of the career path route, or I'm a consultant and maybe I'm making proposals, or maybe I'm doing some kind of public marketing, a show like this, or social media posts, or writing a book, or any of those things, I get caught up in the product again. And then all I am is selling you a cup. But my value really isn't in selling you a cup. My value is in asking the questions. And unless you would like to participate in a two-way engagement in which I ask questions, and this is my way of asking questions, then really I'm not going to get to do what I am best at and where my value is the greatest. And so it's really interesting to see that, because again, we get kind of programmed and then we think this is what marketing is, instead of looking at this is how I would like to do business. I would like to be the curious cat that comes in and is like, wonder, what is this? What is that? What if this? Then how am I reflecting that in my marketing? In most scenarios, people are not reflecting it in their marketing. But there's lots of opportunities to reflect that in marketing efforts if we allow ourselves the freedom to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds very much like something in a book I'm sure we've both discussed before, which is the Win Without Pitching Manifesto. Going into a marketing conversation with the intent of saying, this is how I work. I don't pitch. I'm not gonna work for you for free before we sign a contract together. I'm not going to give away how I'm going to do things, but I'm going to have a conversation with you. I'm going to ask you questions. And if I think this is a good match for me, I'd be happy to work for you, but you've got to work with me in the way I work. And if that's not a match for you, then goodbye. You know, I'm not going to waste your time. Don't waste my time. And it is really interesting, but something far more interesting struck my mind as you were talking, and it's something I just read on medium.com last night. It was one of those stories that flashed up on my screen, and I thought, I'm not. It was something like, my daughter told me I was doing things all wrong or something like that. I forget what the title was. It didn't quite grab me, but then I thought, look, you know what? There's something there. I'm just going to have a look at that. And it was a marketer talking about how his daughter, who was a young adult, I guess, sort of made him realize he'd been thinking about marketing all wrong. And, she was Gen Z, and she was complaining or, letting off some steam about stuff. But it was to do with, she was looking to purchase some kind of assistance online, I don't know, some music or singing, vocal training or something like that. And what she told her dad and what he was writing about, and it was a nice piece. It was written by a human, not by a bot. The thing that that he was sort of drilling down on was, she said, I'm looking to buy assistance. I need to get from A to B, and I'm looking for someone who can help me get from A to B. I'm not interested in paying for content. I'm not interested in paying for information. If I can Google it, why do I need to pay for it? If I can find it on YouTube, why do I need to pay for it? And what he realized was, look, we're too intent on packaging the thing, marketing a course or marketing, a book, some kind of content, and what people really want and what people are really willing to pay for, and why people keep overlooking what you're offering is they don't want the cup. They want to learn what to do with the cup, or how to make.
Maybe not the best example, but
it's not the best example. But they don't, So if I can, like, I'm a musician, and I am constantly looking at, not so much YouTubes, but finding podcasts and sometimes YouTubes and stuff on, improving my musical abilities. And there's a lot of really good free advice out there, and some of them, offer a marked up kind of thing, which is, for X dollars a month, you'll get an hour with me every month, and you send me a recording, I send you feedback on it, kind of thing. And it's sort of, I don't have the time or the money to invest in that at the moment, but it's but that's where he was getting at. It's that kind of thing. His daughter was saying, I want, if I'm going to pay for money, I want individualized attention. I don't want to pay you $30 and you just send me a PDF.
And this is also the thing, right? Like it's very common for people to create a quote unquote freebie as part of their marketing package. And I gotta have the 5 ways that you this, or the 10 hacks to this, or what you're missing in your people observing, right? Like, again, we get caught up in this idea that I have to package something because people are expecting a very specific thing. But if you look at, the example I always use is ideal customer profile templates. You can Google an ideal client profile template and find lots of them. Some of them are helpful, some of them are not, all of them are free. Right? Me helping you identify your ideal customer is different than a template. A template disseminates everything to like the most simplistic level, which generally is now me giving you something that has very little value, but because I'm giving it to you for free, that's the exchange. Except, do I really want my reputation to be that I give you stuff that has very little value? Because personally, that's not what I like to base my reputation on. And so instead, like, how can I demonstrate that, like, I think that the point about like personalized help, I always think this is about like whether the difference between me giving you something and the difference between me grabbing your hand and being like, here we go. You're here, you want to go here, let's go there together. But the way we get there together, in my opinion, is through me asking you questions, to probe for information, to come up with ideas, to create something we can test and then move on to the next thing. That's how I do it. And so, like, honestly, this is what I do with the show. I ask questions, I show how I come up with insights because I'm combining information in specific ways. And there's people who like that, and there's people who don't like that. And there's people who are like, oh, hey, I think that could get me to stage B. And I'm like, okay, great. Let's have a conversation about whether or not that's true, because we both have to believe that we can go together. Otherwise, like, I'm not here to drag you around. Right? Like, we'll go somewhere together. I used the example the other day about the like Wizard of Oz, when they're all like linked in the elbows and they're following the yellow brick road, right? Like, they have a destination, they're going together, they're going merrily. This is how I like to do things. If you want me to drag you down the yellow brick road, we're friends off. This is not what I'm here for. But again, like, it's so simple to get caught up in this, like, well, I'll just have a freebie and then I'll have something that people can like give me their email address for. And there's lots of like logic that makes sense there. But at the same time, now we're going into creating a thing which is not related to the service or the value really that we're going to be providing. And so then we end up wasting a whole bunch of time. And we also end up attracting the people who want the simple solution. I don't, in the area that I work, there isn't a simple solution. There's your solution. Your solution is a mystery today. So we have to figure that out. We have to dig around, is the phrase that you used. And I'm like, this is like, you got to get a shovel. You're probably going to get dirty. It's probably going to be sweaty. Right? You want to dig with me, or you want to get a PDF from somebody that's going to like not even scrape the topsoil off of where you're going, right? Like, I don't want to give you topsoil if that's not where I'm going. I'm going deep into clay, which is the type of soil we have here. And so if you want to go, let's do that. But that's also reveal that as part of our marketing process. Otherwise, we are just attracting the very wrong people.
Yeah, I don't know. That's fascinating. And yeah, I think there's a place for the people giving away the freebies. I mean, we all use them. They're all there's a lot of value. I couldn't get my car started the other day, and I Googled and found someone who had a workaround for getting a Prius started when the battery's flat. It worked, and I got it fixed yesterday. And the mechanic said, "I don't know how you were starting this car. That battery was dead. How did you get it here this morning?" I explained my method, and he still said, "No, that couldn't work, but it worked." So, there's always someone who's solved your problem and given away the advice, the ideas for free. But I was just thinking about the title of this, marketing yourself. I mean, I think we tend to think of that, and even I was approaching this, marketing myself as marketing what I do. So marketing what anthropology is and can be, but it's also actually about marketing my helpfulness, marketing my way of relating, and that's the stuff that people would pay for.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm just handing out, pre-packaged stuff, it's not really, it's not really getting there. And the other thing I was going to say was that there are all these templates and stuff that are for free, and then there's other people who will charge you $30 and send you a book of templates that you could have got for free. But
those are scams.
Yeah.
Look for, if you're in the budget of free, it exists for free. So go find it.
It exists for free. Yeah, exactly. But marketing yourself is marketing what you bring, your curiosity, your way of approaching a problem, and not necessarily to be the problem solver, but to, as you were talking about before, to be the hand holder, to be the sort of a guide through a process. I think people are more willing to pay. Now, some people do want to just pay to get the problem solved because they don't want to deal with it. I'm not so sure I'd be interested in working with those people. I want to work with the people who want to figure out how to preempt the same kind of thing happening next time. So not just focused on the solution, but focused on changing the behaviors and the environments that got them there in the first place. And that's kind of work I like to do. It's kind of work I've always done within organizations, maybe quietly, and didn't make enough fanfare about. No, look, I'd be really interesting to hear more about how you would work with someone who comes from that sort of slightly sort of straight-jacketed academic space, and wanting to sell their services, because I've grown over the 6 years that I've been out there trying to figure this out for myself, and it's been a slow process. I've talked to all kinds of marketers along the way, and they haven't all been particularly helpful, or they haven't always figured out what stage I'm at in my journey, in my growth. And so if you don't get that matched right, which means if they're not listening right, it's not very helpful, because they want to sell you a solution for creating the things, the it's, and you're still trying to figure out what the it is, and they want to help you sell it, and you haven't got it yet. Or you haven't figured out which part of what you do, which part of you it is that you're trying to market. It's for me, it's been a slow journey of sort of shedding some of the assumptions I made about what was valuable in what I know. Not that it's not valuable necessarily, but it's not what I should lead with. What I can lead with is this naive curiosity. I think that's useful. Saying I could come and do an ethnographic study.
Yeah. Right. And I'd be like, what's the value to me of that? Okay.
Yeah.
Also just want to touch on, because I feel like, so you use the word should, this comes up a lot, especially when people who are not, we'll look at it just for marketing, because this is what the show is about. People who are not experts in marketing are like, oh, I should lead with you can lead. One of the things I think is becoming more and more common in marketing, which I think is unfortunate, is that people are like, do it this way. So, like, people don't know how to do it. So I'm going to tell them how to do it. I'm going to make it as simple as possible for them. I'm going to be like, you're going to do this, and you're going to show up with naive curiosity, and this is how you're going to do it. And then you're like, oh, but that's not how I show up with naive curiosity, so it doesn't work for me. And instead of, like you mentioned, we were talking about collaboration earlier, this idea of listening and like paying attention. And maybe this is why I identify marketing or what I would consider good marketers with anthropologists, is that they're observant. Like, I'm not here to sell you my thing. I'm here to observe you and extrapolate where you're at, what makes sense for you, what feels good, what feels bad, what channels you like, which channels you don't. Do you feel comfortable doing video? Do you feel comfortable doing audio? Do you love to write? Like this is not me telling people what to do. And now I'm speaking for myself, right? From an authentic marketing advisor point of view. But like, my job is not I can make suggestions. I will make suggestions because I have ideas. But the point is that, like, I think based on you, from what I've observed, this might be a good fit. Right? If I was a personal stylist, right, I'd be like, you have this skin tone, this color might look good on you. Let's try on this color shirt. Okay? And then you look in the mirror and you're like, actually, no, I hate that color. And you're like, okay, good. Let's try a different color. Okay? The point being, I observe, make recommendations, we try them on, we keep what fits, and we let go of what doesn't. And it's like an iterative process. In a lot of marketing, people, again, have tried to simplify it to this point of like, I'll just tell you what to do. And it might work. Like, my estimate is best case scenario 5% of the time. 5% of the time, what you do matches me exactly. It's probably less than that. Let's give it 2% of the time. 2% of the time we match exactly. And so it works for me. But 98% of the time it fails. Doesn't seem like a very good success record. And so, like, for me, that's not the path I want to go down, because I don't see it work enough times for that to be worth investing in. Whereas if we can, like, pull ourselves back and get curious about, like, what feels right. When are people, I love this. This is one of the things I love about video, and or in person is even better. But like on video, you can be like, you can see people being like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Right? Or you can see people's face like completely disconnected from what you're saying. You're like, okay, that's not resonating with that person. Like, maybe it's this. But then that's the thing where, and this, it's like a underground, we're talking about digging, right? So this is like an underneath layer of what happens in successful marketing that a lot of people don't think about when they're creating marketing, is that it's all about alignment. It's about you believing what I said. Not because I convinced you to believe it, but because somewhere along the way, you've collected enough data that matches with what I'm saying. So you've had enough conversations with other marketers who told you to do things that felt like you would never do them. And so you were like, oh yeah, maybe the more like discovery exploration way is something that makes sense. Or actually, I believe in doing that for my clients from a collaboration point of view. So now when someone says that from a marketing point of view, it makes lots of sense to me. And it's not about education. It's not about convincing. It's not about persuasion. It's not about manipulation, which a lot of people also think goes hand in hand with marketing yourself, but it's just in the alignment. And unless I'm being honest and truthful about who I am and what I believe and how I do stuff and how I bring in the energy and like what I'm looking for in terms of collaboration from people, I can't get that. It becomes unavailable. And therefore, then I'm creating something else that I'm showing to people, which is not that people align with, which then by nature isn't aligned with me. So that it makes my whole process broken.
Yeah, I've got another word to offer you there. I've been backing away from the use of the word alignment because I find, certainly in terms of collaboration, of working with people and working in groups and working in organizations, to me alignment feels too sort of top down, or it's I've got something and you're going to either be aligned with me or not. And I prefer to use the term attunement. I guess it's the musician in me. But it's, you've got to constantly adjust to each other.
Right.
And so it's look, alignment's a good word. I'm not saying it's not a good word.
The funny thing is that
in some context,
the word attunement has come up multiple times for me today. And I'm like, some universal something that's happening in the realm of
Yeah,
attunement.
yeah.
So all good.
Yeah, that's just one of my things the last year or so is, no, I was using alignment and no, I don't anymore.
Yeah. Well, and even this is fun, right? Because like in this moment, what we're demonstrating is like, oh, you said this and I get why you're using that. And this is what's coming up for me. And this is the word I use that like is more meaningful to me. You want to talk about customer research, folks? You can get into a conversation with somebody and then they can just naturally, because they feel comfortable doing so, share an insight with you that then could be like, oh, maybe I could write an article about attunement, or now I'm thinking about who's talking about attunement in like culture. This sounds, if you want to have an orchestra that's not the grade 8 band, which is what I was in, and we all know that is not attunement. Right? Like if you don't want your company to sound like that, and you want your company to sound like world famous symphonies, like that's attunement. What does that look like? How can we use these examples to like, how can we use a passion for music or things like that to help people understand? Because what we're creating in that space is, again, attunement or alignment. People who get the musical side of that will be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And it's different than just saying like, I'm going to, in my ideal client profile, I'm going to profile people who are musicians and then go out and try and like somehow find out who's a musician. You didn't know that I was in the grade 8 band. Probably, maybe we've talked about it before, but you probably didn't, right? I didn't share that on my LinkedIn profile anywhere. It's not anywhere you can find. But when you say that, and I'm like, yeah, I get that, right?
Yeah, and
that's the match.
Yeah, and the other side of it is, even going back to what I was saying before about, marketing yourself by saying, look, I'm not going to do a pitch. I'm just going to have a conversation with you. If you're not cool with that, then let's part company. That could sound like I'm saying, this is how I want to work. If you don't align with that, I don't want to work with you. It's not going to be a good match. But another way of thinking about that is, if you're not willing to have that conversation where we can both learn and change the way we do things, and I think that's where I like attunement better. It's like with alignment, it's sort of you don't work the way I want to work, so I'm not interested. With attunement, it's I might find that I've learned something from the client in a way that shifts my whole way of doing what I do, and I'm open to that. Yeah, and that's why I like that.
Another great example, because you have your own version of what attunement is, and it's actually funny because it came up for me earlier today, so I looked up the definition of attunement because I'm always curious. Then, like, what is the actual definition, like dictionary definition of this? And it talked about balancing and harmony. And the thing that's interesting about like what you just shared is that to me, attunement is about adjusting. It's about adjusting to another party and learning from other people. And even in that, in sharing those types of things from a quote unquote marketing point of view, again, either in a conversation or in a social media post or an article that you write or whatever that might be, it shows people something about you, that I care about participating this way. And if you don't care about participating, if you're just going to be the like loud trumpet over there that is like out of tune and doesn't care, then I'm probably not the right cello player to participate, right? I'm into attunement. If you're into attunement too, then we can probably be very productive together. If you're not, we are not going to be productive together. And like personally, in my own experience, I have seen that to be very true, is that people, and a lot of times people will think they they have an aspirational goal of being like that, but it's not their current way of being today. And if it's not your current way of being today, it's like best case scenario going to take us a very long time for us to get to attunement together. But if I can go into something and be like, oh, you care about this and I care about this, we can actually tune very quickly because we're both trying to do that. But if we're not both trying to do that, then it's an uphill battle. And again, like if we're looking at who do we want as clients, we want a whole bunch of uphill battle clients, or we want a whole bunch of people that are like, hey, yes, I've actually never really understood that was the problem that was happening in my collaborations. But now that you make me think about it that way, that makes lots of sense. And like, let's go have a conversation, right? Let's go have a conversation about it. Let's explore. I love what you said earlier, Tim, about like kind of creating your role, because I do think too, especially if you're looking at anything that's shifting from academia into industry, right? First of all, the roles are very different. So you're going into that with like defined roles. They're not the same. And secondly, we've created a lot of roles in industry that are based on filling time and not based on creating value. And so if you are the type of person who specifically, again, I'm not interested in just like filling time, I'm here to provide this value, then really in most scenarios, you're creating your role. And what you're doing then is saying like, this is what I do. This is the value that I provide. And there's people out there who are like, oh my God, I never even knew there was a guy for that, right? Like, that's what I need. Come on over. Can we please talk about what this is? Because it sounds like exactly my gap. Yeah, great. Let's go. Let's explore. Let's create. But again, we have to be, if we're not sharing that and we get caught up in, I got to create a role for me. I got to create, these are the services I provide. I'm a fractional CMO. This is why I've never identified with the term fractional. First of all, I don't know what that means, right? Like, it doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't say the problem you want to solve. I want to talk about the problem you want to solve. Let's go do that. And so it's an opportunity again for us to at least very minimally be aware that these are kind of the common practices we get sucked into in marketing, creating a job, creating a package, creating a framework, when really I could spend that same amount of time going out to and demonstrating to people who I am and the problem I believe in solving. And then allow, if I'm all about co-creation anyway, like allow the other people to participate in that and be like, wow, that actually sounds like really impactful if I'm trying to do culture work. And I've tried all these other things that didn't work from a culture transformation point of view. So maybe it's worth having a conversation with an anthropologist who's all about studying people. That just seems like it makes sense. And we create those opportunities. And I think if we get started on any other topic, we're going to go way too long.
No, I was about to say, yeah, that sounds like a nice wrap up.
Yeah. Awesome. So Tim, because on the show, I always give my guests the opportunity to share where's the best place to find them, just in case there's somebody who's watching this and like, I would really love to know how an anthropologist could add value to my organization. Where is the best place for people to find you?
Well, you can find me playing my saxophone if you're in Melbourne on Sunday evenings at a small jazz club in the north.
Okay,
sometimes.
So what kind of sax? What kind of sax, first of all?
I play an alto saxophone.
Alto sax, okay.
But no, seriously. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. You can find me on LinkedIn, Tim Pilbrow, and look, I'm on medium.com, I'm on Substack, but I'm not doing a lot of writing on those spaces. It's more here and there. LinkedIn is the place to reach out to me.
Oh, awesome. And you guys know that Tim is in his journey of figuring out how to market himself, especially as an anthropologist. So if you are an anthropologist and you are also looking at exploring that, then maybe get into a conversation with Tim. He's clearly talk to a lot of marketers. Get into a conversation with me. I would love to have more of a conversation about how we can bring these people-y value arenas to light in industry, and how we can get more of these people creating roles that can really create big impacts for organizations and for cultures and for people, so that they can thrive. With that, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. We are coming back at you next week with the second in the series of Marketing Yourself. We're going to be focusing on organizational psychology. So if you're watching today and you happen to be an organizational psychologist, then you'll probably want to come back for that one. Or if you have friends that are, that's going to be a juicy one as well, because all the psychology, also marketing, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you so much for watching today. Also, if you're watching this on replay and you have a question that you'd like to ask, please feel free to put it in the comments, even after the fact. I will get notified and I can come back and answer any additional questions that you have. So connect with me, connect with Tim. Last thing I will say is the last thing I say on every one of these conversations is that if marketing yourself is currently something that is in your priority list, on your priority list, at the top of your priority list, anywhere, if it's important to you, then don't let this be the last conversation you listen to, because we by no means touch all of the things that could be relevant for you in that conversation. Let it be the first of many until you figure out what fits you and how you're going to take that moving forward. So Tim, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation today. Thank you everyone else for watching. And until next time, permission to do you. Bye.
Thank you, Tracy.